Hi, it's Allie. Today I'm going to be talking to you about a televisual tragedy we're studying this week, and I'll be talking about it from my own perspective. And that's the Challenger shuttle explosion on January 28th, 1986. And I'll do this one other time in the semester. I'll talk about September 11th, 2001. And again, for that one, I'll just be giving you my own version of events. And I think you're starting to find this kind of personal history makes what we're studying just a bit more relevant. And as you do your oral history projects, people of my age, Generation Xers, and I'm in my 40s right now, so anyone born between 1965 and 1980 is a Gen Xer. And for us, the Challenger shuttle explosion in the mid 1980s is our major televisual tragedy until the events of September 11th, 2001. And the major difference is for Gen Xers that Challenger shuttle explosion happens when we're children or teenagers, where the events of September 11th happen when we're adults. So the way that you remember things and process a tragedy like that is, of course, very different from childhood through adulthood. So, again, I'm just going to talk about this from my own perspective. And in 1986, I'm in junior high school, so I'm a eighth grader at Blessed Sacrament High School or Blessed Sacrament School here in Madison, Wisconsin, and that's on the west side of town. And I have a little sister, and she also goes to school with me there. And um, what's going on with the Challenger shuttle explosion to make it really important for school children is that there's a contest. So it's the contest to have the first civilian in space, and the first civilian in space is going to be a teacher. And so there's a huge contest nationwide, and this isn't like a little contest. It's there's over 10,000 applicants. Everyone's like invested in this in some way or another. It's is it going to be someone from your state? Will there be a teacher chosen from Wisconsin? Will it be from your town? Like, what if it was your teacher? And so this was kind of a big deal then, and it kind of made a huge awareness for the space program in the 1980s, because after the 1960s, when we got the man to the moon on 1969, and we had a lot of a lot of different shuttles were going off, it became almost commonplace to the American public. And so at this shuttle launch in 1986, January 28th, 1986, the only news coverage was CNN. And this matters too because in this era of the 1980s, as we've been studying, cable television is emerging. And one of the things that happens is cable in the classroom. And so this is kind of important for this because without cable in the classroom, this shuttle launch couldn't have been watched by so many school children live. And so there's kind of a dual thing happening to make this become such a big deal for elementary, junior high, and even high school students in this country at that time. And that's this contest. And so the contest ends up having Krista McAuliffe is the one who ends up winning it. And so she's the teacher who is selected to attend the whole training regime to get ready to go to the shuttle. And all of that is covered on cable in the classroom. And so CNN is making little news stories about, how do you pick the teacher to go to space? How do you train the teacher to get ready to go to space? And all of us school children are following this in the current events. And so you're either doing this with television itself, which is the main mode of transmission, and there's also like little current event magazines that'll go with the news clips that you'll see. And so this makes this become a really big deal to school children. So when this launch actually happens in 1986, there's so much engagement from the youth because of this. And so then we'll watch this, and how I remember it is first of all, our teacher wasn't chosen, and I went to this tiny little Catholic school. We didn't have the cable in the classroom the way my public school friends did, and so I'm not going to be able to convey how I remembered it from the live feed at my school. But I do know that for most of my friends, they did watch the television was brought out, and they did watch the launch live. we were like aware of it and knew that it was happening, but how I remember it um, was not that way at all. I remember all of a sudden, we were aware that the shuttle was going to launch, and we weren't going to watch it, but we were going to watch it like on TV with our parents that night, like on the news, and then probably write a paragraph or two. There was a lot of those kinds of assignments where you'd catch up on the current event at home, and then transmit that with a written exercise the next day. But what ended up happening was the loudspeaker came on, and Sister Stella, she was the principal at this time at the school I went to, her voice crackled over the intercom, and there was the announcement about the shuttle is the first way that I found out about it. And so Sister Stella said something along the lines of, "There's been a terrible tragedy with the Challenger shuttle we've all been praying for, and all of the people aboard, have perished, and let's have a moment of silence for those brave Americans." And like I remember at that moment, like my teacher, she didn't know what the announcement was for either. She's a person, she has emotional reactions, and she took in the news a lot quicker, I think, than the seventh or eighth graders I'm hanging out with at that time. And there's a little bit of an audible like and I think that's what made me know like what was up. And then I kind of, nobody laughed, it wasn't anything like that. There wasn't even like the nervous laughter that sometimes happens, but it was pretty quiet. You could literally have heard a pin drop. And then the teacher was not quite right the rest of the day, but we didn't get sent home or anything like that. I don't know how much time was left in the day. I'd have to look that up, and I was trying to make sure not to look anything up for this before I did my remembering, because other than the date, I wanted to make sure I had the date right for you guys. But I wanted to do it all from recall, because sometimes personal memory isn't exact, and that's kind of one of the interesting things that we're looking at in our studies, and we'll look at that a little bit more in depth with the next personal tragedy I go into, and that's September 11th. But here on what I do remember from that night is my mom came to get us at like the regular go home from school time, but she came to pick us up, and that was kind of a big deal. My sister and I went to school across town, and usually I had to take her across town. And I was already really worried about my sister because she's like very emotional. So after the praying and the silence and the whatnot, I went and checked on her in her classroom, and I didn't get in trouble for that, which again, slightly unusual. I might have been the overprotective sibling here, but I just wanted to make sure she was okay. And she was a bit younger, and she's just a very sensitive sort. And she was pretty shook up and sad and crying. And then I was glad when our mom came to get us after school instead of having to do the huge hour-long bus ride, because I was kind of worried about all the existential questions that my younger sibling was about to ask me and how to answer them. And instead my mom picked us up, we drove home, and I kind of think we even picked up dinner or something because she knew we were a little bit shook up. And when we got home, President Reagan was on TV that night, and that was after the news. We all watched the whole thing together, saw the explosion happen. My brothers are older, and were talking about it and stuff before my sister and I saw it, and then we watched it a couple times, but my parents didn't want us watching like repetitive explosion over and over and over. And we did watch the news together, but that again wasn't that uncommon. We often watched the news and did dinner kind of together. But then President Reagan, he came on television, and he, very much like we see with John F. Kennedy and the Cuban Missile Crisis in the 1960s, we see that come on here. And it was going to be a State of the Union address, and so there was already television lined up. Reagan was expected to appear on television that night. And instead of the State of the Union address with the triumph of the Challenger shuttle, Ronald Reagan addressed the nation, and he did a pretty darn good job of it. Of course, he was an actor. He was very televisual. He knew how to use the camera and how to appear on television, and he did a very good job of that template that we saw John F. Kennedy in the 1960s, where he reassures the country through the medium of television. We see that here with Reagan uh, that night on TV. And I remember that. I remember watching that, and I don't know if I felt relieved. I was like a teenager almost, a preteen, and I don't quite remember what I felt at that time all the time. But the whole thing was pretty confusing. I knew it was like a really big deal to have this happen. I didn't really think about it in terms of our country and how it impacted us on a global stage, but I did know when the president came and talked about it on TV that he was doing that instead of the State of the Union, and I think that helped cement home like how big of a deal this really was. And so anyway, I hope that hearing a little bit about my personal tale on that day, and this is a day I remember pretty darn good. I hope that that helps you kind of relate to some of this material, and as you're working on your oral history papers here at the middle of the semester, anyone my age, Gen Xers again, 1965 to 1980 is when we're born. This is a really pivotal moment for people that you'll interview who are, born in that time. This will be their televisual memory that'll stick with them until September 11th, 2001. All right, thanks again for your attention.